Now it's time for our next session of the day. The topic that will be AI for Good, Sustainability for the Future, moderated by Wendy Gonzalez, CEO of Sama. Over to you, Wendy.
Yes, hello everybody. Hi, I'm Wendy Gonzalez, CEO of Sama, and I'm joining you from a remote area in Wyoming. So apologies for the short blip there, but really glad to be here and share more about AI for Good and sustainability for the future. All right, super. So I think hopefully everybody can see the screen here, but Olaf and I are going to spend some time talking a little bit about sustainability for the future, specifically his incredible business, Orbis, and basically how Sama helps power the computer vision behind Orbisk's food waste solution. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Olaf to kick us off.
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. Back again, Olaf, CEO at Orbisk, one of the founders. We started our company 3 years ago, and apart from sustainability enthusiasts, the three founders, Bart, Richard, and myself, are excited about sustainability, but also about progressive technology and how to leverage that in everyday life, making subjects that were untackleable before to be handled all of a sudden. I'd like to tell you about our fully automated food waste monitor in a bit, but even though I don't want to linger on the problem too much, I shortly want to touch upon that in the next slide and see why we do what we do. I'll show you what food waste looks like in the world. A third of all food that we produce globally is wasted. To give that figure a little bit of context, that means that 2/3 of everything that we produce apparently feeds the world, at least most of it. That means that by throwing away 1/3, we're throwing away about half a year's supply of food every single year. And that's quite striking to me when I started my company about 3 years ago, and it still is. But when you then also consider the struggle that we have with the global CO2 emissions and realize that 8 to 10% of global CO2 emissions can be allocated to food waste, it makes it even more important. 8 to 10% of global CO2 emissions is in the production of food in the first place. We're talking about the emissions by the production, but also the emissions of having disposed food waste lie in landfills producing methane, a very, very potent CO2 gas. But what most people forget it's not only about the CO2 emissions, it's also about the water use, about the energy, about the land use and the soil use that we have, and about the labor that we put into this food, let alone the amount of money that we throw away on an annual basis every single year. Altogether, when we're only looking at the food services industry and retail, that we service, we're talking about 362 million tons of food every year. Also, to put that into context, that's about, and you might realize this looking at the figure, that's about 1 million tons per day. That's feeding 500 million people every single day, and that's what we throw away, all of us together. A catastrophe, let's be honest, but you know, this is the reason why I started addressing waste, because there's so much potential there. Imagine what you can get when you're trying to solve this. No one really, I wanted to be a fireman when I was younger, never being dealing with waste. But the moment you see what the power, the potential is of waste, it's quite fascinating. And in these pandemic times, it's actually even more important than ever. Hotels and restaurants have been closed for most of the year, at least in the regions that all of us are from, I think. And meaning that, in fact, the waste levels have risen in that time. Restaurants and hotels and company caterers have been working suboptimal, and there's nothing worse than having a situation that you can't plan for properly. And that's why the waste levels have even risen in the last year. But let's try and see how we can tackle that today. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to our product. Next slide, please. Because indeed, we allow hotels, restaurants, and cafes to reduce their food waste by up to 70% on the average. And what we do is, you can see it here on the left-hand side, but I'll show you a video in a little bit. but we automatically address food waste by means of image recognition technology. And what you can see here is a monitor that automatically quantifies food waste. And so far, with this technology, as a young company, we've been able to avoid a waste of over 100,000 kilograms of food. And that means feeding 50,000 people for a day. So even for a company as young as ourselves, we've been working for some 50 restaurants so far. We've been able to save an average of 4,000 kilograms per restaurant, which, and coming back to the money element of this thing, saving them over 25,000 euros annually per restaurant. And that's a margin improvement of over 2% in a low margin industry. We're talking about an industry that runs an average margin of 5%, and we're topping that up by an additional 2% of margin. And mind you, again, this is how potent food waste and the prevention of it can be. We've been working with some of the biggest company caterers and hotels, as you can see down below, regionally, but also internationally. And that's why we're hoping to scale this solution and save over 100 million kilos of food waste in 2025. But let's indeed shortly touch upon what this solution actually looks like. What we saw right here was a chef or a cook in an average kitchen, just having some surplus, and he walks over to the waste bin, scans the food, throws it away, and goes out. And this is where this collaboration that we're talking about today of Sama and Orbisk comes together, because we detect waste by means of image recognition technology. Computer vision and AI are used to scan a plate of food, but in general, it's a pan or it's a cutting board or it's a big tray of food, because 70% of the food in restaurants never even leaves the kitchen. And we scan this food in under half a second. A picture is taken, and what you didn't see on the clip is that there's a weighing scale underneath of the waste bin. And this combination of a picture and a weight, we can quantify the amount of food and see how much of that was going to waste unnecessarily, focusing on recurring losses, structural losses that we can then help them address and see how they can reduce it, and thus improve sustainability, but also profitability. In the end, together in the very, very long term, we of course hope that this will eliminate waste altogether. For now, that's a bit of a dream scenario, but my best intention is to make our own solution redundant one day. But for now, this is the size of the problem, and this is what we need to have to address it. Because traditionally, people and restaurants have been using pen and paper, and in some cases a spreadsheet, but that's very inconsistent, subjective, and therefore not enough to be able to really grasp this problem and reduce it. And that's how we address this problem by means of indeed computer vision technology, and that's where Sama comes in. Wendy, can you flip it over to the next slide? And in this way, by quantifying food, by training our algorithms with identified images of food, we can unlock an 127 billion dollar opportunity by reducing food waste. Again, the potency of waste is unimaginably big, and that's what we're addressing today by Sama. We've been integrating with Sama services because an AI algorithm, as most of you will know in this conference of today, needs training. We need people to tell a machine what's an apple, what's rice, and what's a cucumber. And that's exactly what Wendy and her team are doing for us every single day, making sure that also they will be redundant to us one day once we've trained our machine learning algorithm to such levels that it'll be able to do so fully automatically. But then there will be new use cases. We've been incredibly happy to work with them, not only from a technical point of view, but also from a societal point of view. But I'll let Wendy talk you through what that exactly is they do for this planet.
Excellent. Thank you, Olaf. Yeah, incredibly happy to be here. And as Olaf mentioned, I mean, how really the computer vision application learns and can detect is really requires training data. And that's what our company does. We are a training data platform with labelers who help identify what these objects are and teach the machine how to recognize the various different food types. One interesting fact right now is we have well over 1,000 types of food labeled and detectable right now, which is pretty incredible. And what I'll do now is I'm actually going to show you sort of a quick video that basically describes what the annotation process looks like. And very quickly, what it really is about is, one, it is detecting the object itself. So in this case, we'll show you an apple. The second component is then you actually have to properly label it so that the machine knows not only what it is looking at, but what that object is. As you can see there, not only as the apples are coming out of the machine, it was a video, so the apple actually had to be detected at various different portions in the frame, and then it was everything from what kind of an apple is it to additional data. Anyhow, this is basically what training data is, and very simply put, for machine learning, it's really a garbage in, garbage out kind of scenario, because artificial intelligence is really only as intelligent as the data it's built on. And so what's incredibly important as it relates to training data is the quality. So how can we ensure that, with a 95, for example, up to 99.5% accuracy, that indeed is a perfect outline of the apple, as well as, was it tagged properly? So one of the things that we focus on very, very heavily is data accuracy, because imagine, if we did not have accurate data, then the machine would not be able to detect the food waste properly. The other component of this, of course, is related to efficiency. So I'm not sure, Olaf, if you know how many images have been processed so far, but as you can imagine, to train these machines, while hopefully they will get trained and we will be indeed redundant at some point in time, it does take quite a bit of information to train. And so what it means is that we have to drive forward the labeling process with as much efficiency as possible. So actually, in the Sama platform, we also leverage machine learning to be able to speed up both the accuracy and the scalability of the labels itself. So we've been very heavily focused on our platform and building machine learning models that are trained by our humans in the loop to automate as much of the process as possible. And then certainly, last but not least, the key thing here is really agility. As you can imagine, the more data that gets processed by these computer vision models, the more edge cases are detected. Right? So what does it look like, and what are the rules when the apple is bruised? And we've been doing this for over 12 years, actually, since about 2010 is when we first started doing training data. And we are working with incredibly innovative startups like Orbis to large Fortune 2000s like Google, Walmart, Ford, and Microsoft. But what I shared is sort of what we do. I'll now talk a little bit about why we do it. So Sama, we are part of the ethical AI supply chain. We are a double bottom line business. So we are a B Corp certified. And we were really founded on the notion that talent is distributed equally, but opportunity is not. And the best way to move people out of poverty is by giving them work instead of giving aid. And so we have a purposeful hiring model to where we hire in underserved communities with households that are making less than $2 a day, which is the world-based standard for poverty. And we provide not only digital skills training, but full-time employment and benefits at living wages in the communities we work in. We are primarily focused in East Africa, in both Kenya and Uganda. And what's been really incredible about this is that we are not only sort of immediately lifting people out of poverty by this purposeful hiring model, but we also specifically focus on women. So we have a purposeful hiring model in these underserved communities with at least 50% women. But don't just take my word for it. One of the things that we've been very heavily focused on is also validating our impact. So beyond actually tracking it, tracking our financial growth, and we've also been tracking our impact from day one. Very recently, and we're incredibly proud of this, we just had a randomized control trial that was published by MIT and Poverty Action Labs. And what this is it's very similar to like a drug trial where you have control groups. One is what happens, well, I should say you have control groups. And the idea is to basically, completely independently and through detailed statistical analysis, prove the efficacy of your model. So what we were trying to prove at Sama was, did our intervention of purposely hiring people in underserved communities, did it truly break the poverty cycle? 3 years after people joined Sama, did they have higher employment outcomes? And did they have higher wages? And we did this over the course of 3 years in conjunction with Poverty Action Labs, where we tracked a group that would have normally received the Sama Source training, the Sama training, as well as hiring and employment model, those who just received the training, and those who are both trained and hired. And what we were able to find over the course of that 3-year study was that there were significant and material improvements in both income as well as employment for our populations. Specifically, I'll just make a note that with women, there's a 270% increase in both wages and employment. So that's pretty incredible, meaning having received the Sama intervention and the hiring model, they were 3 times more likely to have wages as well, improved wages. I should say 3x the wages as well as 3x the employment. Beyond that, one of the things that is very interesting is you can only imagine that COVID and this horrible global pandemic has had an incredible impact, and in particular, it impacts the underserved communities the most. So it's incredibly important for us to not only ensure the continuity of employment, but also to ensure that could happen in a safe and effective manner. So most of our workforce, which comes from remote rural areas like Gulu, Uganda, or in the slums of Nairobi, we actually work to get fiber to the home laid out in these informal communities, working with local ISPs to lay 34 miles of fiber optic cable to allow our workforce to work from home and continue producing high quality training data. So it's something we're extremely excited about, because not only is internet being provided to actually do the training data work, but it is given access to unlimited internet for the entire family. So really where we are is that we are really, really heavily focused not only on working with an incredible concept Orbis to drive forward AI for good, but it's really about providing transparency in the AI supply chain. Right? It's about, it's about really providing both not only the dignity and respect of a professional job, getting paid living wages, but really it is the transformation and the opportunity to build career skills. And what we found is that 3 years after people leave Sama, they are in equivalent or higher paying jobs. So it's really, really important. And one of the things that we are incredibly appreciative of working with companies like Orbis is that we need to ensure that we are really advocating for an ethical and representative supply chain, that there's transparency in the wages that are being paid, and to really dispel the notion of ghost workers. So with that said, thank you for taking a few minutes to learn a little bit more about the incredible work that is being done by Orbis, as well as learning a little bit about how training data powers these computer vision models and the Sama model of the ethical supply chain. I think at this point, we're free to take any questions. And I see that there is one question here, which is, how can AI today help most reduce our emissions, since until 2050, we need to go from 51 gigatons of GHG to 0 emissions?
Shall I take a jab at that to start? I can't speak for the total greenhouse gas emissions, obviously, because I'm most aware of the impact that food has. But AI has a very strong position in the total food system. I told you today about the power of waste reduction, which is only part of the food supply chain, but it's a very critical part. But it starts by not measuring waste, or it doesn't only involve measuring waste at the end. It measures the whole food system, because the risk you run is that we prevent food waste from happening at the end of the food chain in restaurants or in retail. There's less bought. by these restaurants because there's less going into the waste bin. That's the win, right? They need to optimize their process, and then they can reduce the amount they buy and thus waste. If we were to stop there, then the problem would only move to one chain, a little chain link further up the chain in your wholesalers, and all the way up to your producers, the farmers. And if we were to only isolate and resolve the problem at the end of the chain, then we still have a problem at the start of this chain. And that's where I think that AI will have a very strong impact in due time. Not only on the image recognition end that we are supplying, although that will have a bigger impact on other parts of the supply chain where you can have automated tracking, as Wendy just elucidated upon and showed us an example of apples somewhere way in a different place in the supply chain than we are. The AI that will more accurately link demand and what do you call it, supply and demand. There will be more AI-driven systems that will be able to intelligently link those two together, and that will reduce food waste across the supply chain and also enhance the efficiency of food production. I'm most confident. So not a complete answer, I'm afraid, because I'm not aware of all greenhouse gas emissions, but I think that's a very strong one. Apart from that, I do also think, but that's more of a hobby, in the transport sector, by means of autonomous vehicles, there will be a lot of impact by the means of AI systems. What do you think, Wendy?
Yeah, absolutely. That's an area that we focus on quite a bit. So I think between the two, there's going to be a significant dent being made. That, and of course, greater use of greater use of non-fossil fuel based energy. So there's something kind of related to this. Another question it says, with training data, do you think most should think of sustainability even before capturing the data to get maximum effect? Well, I think that you sort of touched on that already, Olaf, in that this solution that you've built can be moved all the way up the supply chain, right? So before it even gets to being food produced, there can be really, I guess what I'd maybe describe it as really visibility, right? Because at the end of the day, many of these hotels and these, even at that point in the supply chain of producing these foods, they're not aware.
I think we lost a little bit of your connection there, Wendy, but let me see if I can indeed fill what I thought you were saying. Indeed, the awareness in the first place, and I think that's also what the question is aimed at. You can start applying AI. You can start applying recognition systems, quantifying systems. But if there's no intention to change, then indeed that's not the first step. Awareness and culture is always one of the first steps that goes hand in hand with the type of systems that we're training and that we're deploying. In fact, for my system, if there's no willingness to work with it, people can abuse the system easily and just throw their food out somewhere else, and you bypass the whole system. So if there is actually people are still able to refuse this problem. However, I think that's what you mentioned when your connection dropped, Wendy. The type of systems that we train, the type of systems that we deploy, brings a lot of awareness about the size and the specific place of the problem and how it is to be resolved. And that's exactly what we deliver together, is the fact that we now know not only that it's a big problem, but also where it is. And then being able to grasp it, that's an important agreed next step. But the first step is your willingness to change and to acknowledge the fact that this is a problem, but then the willingness to go for a solution. I hope that answers the question, if I understand it well.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly it, Olaf. Is that it's really about the the desire to have that visibility and awareness. But what's incredible is that like other double bottom line businesses, not only are you reducing carbon emissions, reducing waste, but you're also improving margin and bottom line, which is really incredible. So I did have a question for you, Olaf. What is so you're working with some really incredible catering and hotel, hotels. What is next for Orbisk in terms of growth and expansion?
Yeah, it's a good question. First, we're still a startup company, so first we're grabbing what we have and making sure that it runs stably. We've seen that there's a lot of profitability to be gained, but it's also a very high hurdle that we get over. Any high-tech solution will require a high financial hurdle. But what's the next step? Indeed, we're focusing on hotels, we're focusing on restaurants, on cafes, on company caterers. But the next step is really anything that where food is produced, because that's basically, we are the first ones that have an algorithm trained by you guys actually, that is able to recognize food in all shapes and sizes, as opposed to only apples, but perfectly recognizing apples. That's what we don't need. We need to recognize apples in half, or in parts, or in even in a mash. We are able to recognize all these type of foods, and this knowledge, this capability can then be applied everywhere. So what I'm going for is we're also looking at going for aviation, where there's also a lot of food going to waste. But mind the fact that it's not only producing the greenhouse gas emissions that I've just shown, but also the fact that it's then also lifted into the air. As we all know, also a very impactful, so it actually doubles the amount of CO2 impact per kilo when food is also, shot into the air. And another very, very impactful one I see as our next frontier would be going into the healthcare industry, where it's not only about, and I'm talking about like patient food, taking care of hospital patients, elderly care patients, not only looking at the amount of food that was lost, but also the amount of food that was consumed. Because indeed we've trained an algorithm to recognize all types of food, and this way we can also take this recognition of food one step further, quantifying food waste and quantifying food consumption, and thus helping patients become more healthy by means of the tracking. So get ready, Wendy, because there's a load of new pictures coming your way.
I think that sounds amazing. Yeah, I was just where my mind was going is thinking about all the different places you could take this technology, schools as well, right? That are also charged with the nutrition and well-being of our children. So there are so many places you can take this detection of food waste and consumption. It's really, really interesting. That's fantastic. One other question I had for you, Olaf, because I know for myself it's really interesting to really balance a double bottom line business. So you have a double bottom line business where you are, doing something incredible for the world, but also of course trying to grow. Do you have any kind of thoughts on how you or anything you'd like to share with the group here as to how you really find that balance of those two bottom lines?
Absolutely. I mean, what you're referring to is the fact that we're trying to make an impact, a sustainability impact, and that we're also trying to be a profitable business, right? This is the double bottom line situation.
Yeah.
And that's been, on the one hand, it's very challenging because there is sort of easier commercial opportunity to grasp, I feel, every once in a while, by just being, neglecting the whole situation around you and just selling something. The thing about it is that I'd never be able to grasp people's, like looking at my colleagues, like really touch someone in their hearts, and thus my people work harder than I've ever done for anyone else, and I work harder than I've ever done for anyone else, because we're intrinsically motivated, because we feel in what we do every day that it's contributing to something bigger. And I'd find it so much harder to do that for a product that doesn't motivate me as it does. like this. But also, sustainability, let's be very clear, is not something that is that's non-profitable. It's been shown that every euro invested in food for institutions like the restaurants that we're serving, every euro invested in reducing food waste will come back to you 7 to 12 times around. So there's a return on investment of 7 to 12 on every euro invested on food waste. There's just been a lack of solutions to date why this has not been done before, and that's what we're providing. But again, very, very excited about the topic of waste in general. There's just so much to do in this space, and triggering this double bottom line. So that's why I'm in this game. But it is a game also, I would say, for the long haul. It's less of an easy buck, but it will be more exciting and more intrinsically motivating, and still very profitable in the not so distant future. And this profit can then again, the wheel will be spinning, and we can invest this in new profitable and sustainable solutions, which I'm very much looking forward to and dreaming of. How about yourself?
I could not agree more. I think you articulated it perfectly. I myself cannot imagine working in a business anymore that doesn't have a purpose beyond creating profit. And what's really, really interesting, I think you articulated it so well, is that impactful businesses are good businesses. Yes, they do take some additional investment. This is the hardest job I've ever had. I've never felt more responsible, and certainly in my life, but at the end of the day, in our example, we have a purposeful hiring model where we are hiring in these underserved communities. And so it may seem counterintuitive when lots of companies are trying to reduce, labor or pay them cents on the dollar for this kind of work. But what is really interesting is that while we've not only gone in and provided, both this purposeful hiring approach, digital skills training, annotation training and training on our platform, what happens is that while we are paying living wages, right? So every year we do an audit, we ensure that we're paying living wages. What it means is that these are meaningful jobs. And because they're meaningful jobs, we have incredible retention. So as a result of making this longer term investment, the impact from a business perspective, we have people who, you just go out to a crowd and find, somebody who can understand, semantic segmentation or 3D point cloud lidar or 1,000 1,000 plus class list of taxonomies. It requires expertise, and because of the impact hiring model, we end up having expertise. So at the end of the day, while it is a significant investment, it also yields great business results as well. And so if you can find that, exactly to your point, right, that sort of flywheel, things that turn the motion while the investment is significant, you end up with incredible results. And from that perspective, while it may not seem completely intuitive, it does take some additional investment and work. The results are absolutely incredible. So I'm extremely appreciative also of companies like yourself that find value in working with other companies that have a purpose as well. That's one of the things I would probably leave with this topic in mind is that impactful businesses, impact and having a social impact and environmental impact, these are criteria that people should be using to make their buying decisions. It doesn't have to be us. This is not a plug per se. It's really about using business as a means to drive change. And every company, where there are literally trillions of dollars being spent on the supply chain, just taking that extra moment to think about the criteria in which you select your partners in that supply chain, you can make an incredible difference in the world, whether it's reducing greenhouse emissions or moving people out of poverty. And I'd like to leave with one sort of stat that I'm particularly proud of. But since we launched in 2008, we've moved over 55,000 people out of poverty. And this is just us, one company. So imagine what we can do if we all make those kinds of decisions.
And let's be clear, right, Wendy? It's apart from rewarding and stuff. the fact that it's for companies like ourselves, it's one less thing to worry about in the end, because the large corporations, every single company has a CSR strategy and has to worry about how in the name of whomever, how they're going to be able to at least turn their negative impact around. And for us, it's just intrinsic. So really, it's one less thing to worry about, because what we do is sustainability. So we don't have to worry any further apart from like working with you, because what we do is CSR, and that's
Exactly.
that makes it easier in a way.
That's right. That's right. It's not something you have to think about after the fact. It's just what you do, and it's how you operate, which is really, really incredible.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled with the technology that you've created is absolutely amazing, Olaf. What the problem that you're attacking in the world is even more incredible. So extremely proud to be a partner with Orbisk, and would just encourage really anybody who's listening here to think about AI for good. There's AI for good through sustainability, through representation, through diversity. So I'm extremely proud to be working with Orbisk, and really appreciate everybody's time and coming to our session.